Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're like, well, pretty much anyone, the mere thought of negotiating a salary, haggling over a car, or working out a contract probably makes your palms sweat and your heart race. It's just inherently stressful, right? But today, we're going to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about sitting across the table from someone and trying to make a deal. We're going to break down a really powerful framework that literally transforms negotiation from this grueling zero-sum battle into a genuinely collaborative opportunity for wealth creation. Let's just jump right in.
Okay, so let's tackle the very first question most people ask when they walk into a negotiation. How do I get what I want? Now, I get it. That makes total sense why we start there. You walk in, you've got a hard number in your head, a strict deadline you absolutely cannot miss, and your defensive walls are way up. It's just human nature to focus purely on survival and getting our piece of the pie. But honestly, starting with this question is actually the absolute worst possible way to kick things off. Why? Because it immediately puts you on the defensive. You're entering the room ready for a fight, which instantly turns the other person into an enemy rather than a potential partner.
So, to get what we really want, we need a massive mindset shift. We have to step away from that scarcity-driven me versus you boxing match. You know, that stressful vibe where every single dollar I gain automatically means a dollar you lose. Instead, we're going to embrace a radically different three-step progression. We are moving from me over to you and finally landing on us. Because masterful negotiation isn't just about aggressively guarding your side of the board, it's about actively discovering whether there is an us to begin with. It's a journey of discovery, not just a battle of wills. And that brings us to the very first stage of this framework. Question 1. Me. What do I want? This whole thing actually starts with negotiating with yourself first. Long before you even walk into the room or hop on that Zoom call, you have to do the hard work of figuring out what you are truly trying to achieve. But here is where so many people completely trip up. They confuse their position with their interest. Think of it like a giant iceberg. Your position is just the tiny visible tip sticking out above the water, like, say, demanding exactly $100,000 in salary. But your interests, those are the massive, foundational, and sometimes kind of messy needs hiding deep underneath the water. Why do you actually want that 100 grand? Is it because you need long-term financial security? Are you looking for liquidity to buy a house? Or, let's be real, do you just desperately want to avoid looking foolish in front of your boss or your peers? The number itself is just a surface-level expression of a much deeper human need. And wrapping your head around that difference is exactly why this distinction matters so incredibly much. Think about it. If you walk into a negotiation only clinging to your rigid position, saying to yourself, I must get $100,000 or I'm walking, you have exactly one solution. It's binary. Pass or fail. Win or lose. There's zero flexibility. But if you take the time to understand your underlying interests, like realizing, oh, I actually just need long-term financial security and a better work-life balance, boom, it suddenly opens the door to 10 possible solutions. You could confidently take a slightly lower baseline salary, but negotiate for lucrative stock options, maybe an extra 3 weeks of paid time off, or a flexible remote work schedule that saves you thousands in commuting costs. The clearer you are on your deep underlying interests, the more creatively and freely you can negotiate.
Okay, once you've figured yourself out, we move right along to step 2. Question 2. You. What do they want?
Now, this is the part almost everyone skips. We get so hyper-focused on our own needs, our own quotas, and our own stress that we totally forget there is a living, breathing human being with their own intense pressures sitting right across from us. This step requires you to do one thing incredibly well: genuinely listen. And when I say listen, I mean listen like a detective. You aren't just politely pausing to find a tiny gap in the conversation so you can jump in and launch your counteroffer. No, you're listening to uncover their hidden constraints. What are they secretly afraid of? What does a successful quarter actually look like to their very demanding boss? Ultimately, you want to uncover the answer to this question. What do they value that you might be able to uniquely provide? And this is where it gets really fun. You start to realize that differing priorities aren't roadblocks at all. They're actually where the magic happens. They are your biggest opportunities. For instance, you might be fiercely guarding your price, completely inflexible on the dollar amount, while they actually care way more about the speed of delivery. You might want a massive upfront fee, while they're just desperately trying to lock in a longer multi-year commitment so they don't have to suffer through the absolute nightmare of training a new vendor again next year. When you spot these asymmetries, when you value X and they value Y, you can start trading things that cost you very little but mean the absolute world to them. Which leads us perfectly into the third question. Question 3, us. Now, what do we want?
This right here is the pivot. This is the exact moment that changes absolutely everything about the entire conversation. Instead of asking how to strong-arm or force the other person to agree with your side, you completely flip the script. You ask, what outcome would make sense for both of us? You're no longer fighting over a fixed, shrinking pie where someone has to lose. You're actively asking how to bake a much larger pie by designing a customized deal that hits both sets of your deep underlying values perfectly.
Let's make this super concrete. Imagine you're negotiating with a critical supplier. You want a lower price, but they absolutely refuse to budge because their margins are already razor thin, and they're stressed about cash flow. Now, the old way, you'd spend 45 exhausting, blood pressure-raising minutes arguing in circles over $2. It ruins the relationship and gets you absolutely nowhere. The new way, you ask what you both want. Maybe they desperately need predictable volume to keep their factory running, and they want a longer, stable relationship. So, you design a deal. You offer them a 2-year contract with guaranteed volume, and in exchange, they give you that better discounted rate you needed. You literally stop trying to win a petty argument, and you start designing an intelligent deal.
And what's truly fascinating about this approach is the sheer abundance of non-monetary value you actually have at your disposal to trade. The absolute best negotiators in the world, they don't just throw money at a problem. They look at a whole menu of options: certainty, speed, exclusivity, flexibility, reduced risk, or even personal introductions. You can often give the other side something that costs you almost $0, like offering a warm introduction to a key industry contact they've been trying to reach, or simply giving them a bit of flexibility on a delivery timeline, but it is incredibly valuable to them. You give them what they value deeply, without ever giving away what you value most.
And that brings us to a much deeper lesson here: the wealth mindset.
Because honestly, this framework isn't just a clever tactic for closing a software deal or haggling over a used car. It's fundamentally about how you operate in the world to build genuine, lasting wealth in both your professional and personal life. There are basically 3 distinct mentalities at play here. At the absolute bottom, you've got scarcity thinking. That's the mindset constantly asking, how much can I extract from this person? It treats every interaction as a zero-sum battle. Then you move up to strategic thinking. What does this person value? This is definitely better, but it's still highly tactical and pretty transactional. But at the very top, that's the true wealth mindset. It asks, what can we create together that neither of us could create alone? It treats negotiation as a highly collaborative act of shared value creation.
All right, moving on to knowing your BATNA. Now, before we get too carried away singing Kumbaya and collaborating on world peace, we do need to establish one very important caveat. Finding a we does not mean being a pushover. You have to have firm boundaries. And to do that, you need to know your BATNA, which stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Basically, what is your backup plan if this whole thing completely falls apart? For instance, if you're negotiating a job offer, your BATNA might just be staying comfortably at your current job. Listen, finding an us does not ever mean abandoning your core interests or accepting a terrible deal just to make people happy. A truly strong negotiator always grounds themselves deeply in their BATNA. They know their absolute minimum acceptable outcome before they even say hello. By deeply understanding your own limits, knowing exactly what you can comfortably trade and what is strictly off limits, and being entirely willing to walk away when a deal just doesn't make logical sense anymore, you protect yourself. You ensure you are never negotiating from a place of desperation, but rather a place of total clarity and calm. You never confuse empathy with weakness. This is your armor, really. It allows you to be kind, incredibly open, and highly collaborative, precisely because you know exactly when to pull the ripcord and safely walk away. Which leads us to the real power of US. When you can balance that incredibly strong boundary with a genuine desire to uncover mutual interests, that is when you unlock the real power. On the surface, you might be looking at a total stalemate, right? The buyer crosses their arms and says, I need the price lower. And the seller just shakes their head and says, I can't lower it. End of story, right? But wait, beneath that tense surface-level stalemate over price usually lies a perfectly solvable, almost beautiful puzzle. Turns out, the buyer actually just needs budget predictability for their finance department. And the seller, they just need long-term commitment to justify taking on the account. Suddenly, when you uncover those underlying interests, you aren't just arguing anymore. You're having a real, highly productive conversation. The breakthrough isn't a louder, better argument. It's a better, more thoughtful question. So before you head into your very next negotiation, whether that's finally asking for that raise, buying your first house, or structuring some massive business partnership, write down these 3 pillars. 1. Me. Take the quiet time to negotiate with yourself first and find your true underlying interests, not just your rigid positions. 2. You. Listen deeply and fiercely to uncover what the other person values that you can provide easily. And 3. US. Ask what outcome actually makes sense for both of you.
This ensures you're discovering the hidden value that everyone else completely missed, and it unlocks an entirely different level of elite deal-making.
Ultimately, the true art of negotiation leaves us with a really powerful challenge. It forces us to stop asking, "How do I beat you?" and start asking, "What can we build?" So I'll leave you with this thought. Instead of fighting over a fixed, shrinking pie in your next negotiation, what will you create together? Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.